another good morning. I forgot to turn the microphone on the first time. You're listening to Rouser Radio out of East Sussex. I suppose that should really throw me that I got off to a false start. But there you are, it's Wednesday morning as opposed to any morning in the rest of the week. And Monday was supposed to be a very bad day, the worst in the year, according to the experts, because it's the third Monday after the new Christmas, and we all had a jolly good time. But here we go, cock-ups this morning. All over. Anyway, there we go. Not quite as smooth a start as we could have hoped, but we've started anyway, and we're away. And it's 3:06 on Wednesday. I think it's the 23rd of January. Somebody said to me yesterday, I can't remember whether today is Wednesday or tomorrow is Wednesday or whenever. And I must say that this month has been very strange because it's very difficult to keep track of the days. But anyway, Wednesday it is. Cold it is. Radio Rouser this is. And Keith Hayes I am. And I hope that perhaps you'll join me for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, just to catch up on what's going on in the world and how it might impact on Lewes, not just Lewes, but the tiny towns of East Sussex, the towns from Battle to the edge of Brighton. Delightful towns they are, for those who aren't familiar with East Sussex. A very rural county, really worth visiting. Any of the towns that in East Sussex are worth visiting, but the countryside is just absolutely stunningly beautiful, as are the beaches, the seaside, and the famous White Cliffs, which stretch all the way along our coast and up to the next county over, Kent, called the Garden of England, but I'm not so sure that it's any more beautiful than our lovely East Sussex. Anyway, you're very welcome. But talking about the beaches, the Border Force has stepped up its efforts to stop illegal immigrants crossing the Channel, but it's invoked the help of Sussex Police. And I think it's called Operation Kraken. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Kraken, it's a beast that sleeps for a long, long time and then suddenly comes alive and creates havoc. And John Wyndham, who wrote famous science fiction books in the 50s and the 60s, did one called The Kraken Wakes. And it's all about the Earth taking a little bit of a battering, and the Kraken comes pouring out, and as in the legend, creates absolute havoc. So anyway, Operation Kraken is to try hard to keep immigrants from landing on Sussex beaches, as the Chief Constable says, to keep our beaches safe. Some of you would take a different view, I'm sure, but nonetheless, the police are now keeping an eye and patrolling our beaches. We should say to you that we haven't so far had any land on Sussex beaches, or at least according to the records. Who knows? I mean, it's the sort of thing that's very difficult to keep track of. Anyway, I think that it is Wednesday, and it's not Saturday. And I'm going to play something called Easy Saturday, just because it's a pleasant sound. Before I do, I think it's incumbent upon me to issue the warning that we are going to get a real icy blast today. Snow right across the country. Whether that means East Sussex, I don't know. We sometimes have particularly in Lewes, we have our own microclimate, and when the rest of the country is baking hot, we're raining, and when the rest of the country is raining, we're baking hot. So whether we'll get snow or not, I don't know, but it is going to be cold. In some places, it's going to plunge to -12, and -12 is pretty damn cold. So first of all, wrap up. Secondly, be careful when you walk, because it can be very slippery. The other day I walked down one of the Twittons in Lewes, and it has little pools of water in potholes that haven't been fixed, and the ice was quite thick. In fact, you could stand on the ice. It was that cold on, I think that was Monday, and it's going to be that cold again today, with the possibility of snow, so do be careful. Yeah, take it easy. Let's have an easy Saturday. Easy Saturday. Let's hope that it's going to be easy Wednesday. A warning, snow on the way, freezing, could be -12. Now, fortunately, the last couple of days we haven't had much wind, but the chill factor plays a part, and my late wife was born on the prairies in Canada, and as a very little girl, she remembered that often, because of the wind, the chill factor could go down to -30, even though the actual temperature was only about -12. And she said that it was PD cold. And so if there's a bit of a breeze around, don't just look at the temperature itself. Figure that it's going to be a bit colder still because of what's known as the chill factor. We say on this program that we like to be local but not parochial. Well, what does that mean? What it means is that some of the things that are happening around this, small concerts, art galleries, and so on and so forth, is we don't have really the time or the resources to be able to mention, worthy though they are. But we don't have to worry really, because there are so many other outlets that do mention those sort of things. And one outlet particularly that is good for letting us know what's going on are the small, I say one outlet, there are lots of outlets, but one for each community normally, the small Facebook groups that exist. And the one for Lewes is called Lewes Present. And the boss is a chap called Mick Symes. And I've not met Mick, but I find him very, very articulate. And I also find that his arguments are very sound and well thought out. He's obviously a very, very knowledgeable chap. And I shall look forward to having a meeting to him. I suggested we might get together, and he gave me one of those funny little thumb signs, pointing with the thumb up on my website. So I hope that it won't be too long before we can put our heads together. The reason I mentioned Mick this morning is that in Lewis Present yesterday, there was an example of where I think saying we're local but not parochial, it was a very good example. There was a lady in Manchester who had her 2 dogs confiscated by the police, and she'd written a really heart-wringing explanation as to why these dogs had been taken, but chillingly, in that, she said they took the dogs without any sort of warrant on the basis that they were dangerous, which she says, mind you, any owner would say this, but which she says isn't so. But what really bothers me is, she says, they won't tell me where the dogs are being held. Now, Mick writes that he knows the 2 breeds that are mentioned, and that in fact they are gentle, but they are quite noisy. And this is what the woman says. And after that, there is quite a long discussion with a lot of people getting involved about these 2 dogs. The other thing that bothers me about this story is there are a couple who say, what's that got to do with Lewis? You know, this incident may have happened in Manchester, but it could happen here, and it can happen around the country. But also, we are subject to the same legislation. Manchester, Lewis, East Sussex, Battle to Brighton, we all come under the same laws. And once in a while, I think that it's important that groups such as Lewis Present discuss these sort of things and what the effect is. And some very interesting information came to light as a result of this discussion. The rights that the police do have and don't have. That if they turn up and they want to seize your dog, that there are certain things that you should do and you shouldn't do. And the whole discussion was extremely, extremely interesting, very informative, very articulate. So thanks, Mick, for because as the boss, you can say what goes on these on the group pages and what doesn't. And I think it is a very, very interesting discussion. The other thing, of course, is which is so typical, is that the lady in Manchester says, you know, there were sort of 8 police cars and 20 coppers and so on and so forth, all come to pick up 2 little dogs. Well, one was a German Shepherd, I think, or a breed very close to a German Shepherd. The other one was quite small. And as she says, you know, not only did that scare the hell out of the dogs, but so that they started to bark and yap and gave every evidence of what they were being accused of. But also, it scared the hell out of the owners as well. Everybody thought there was a madman on the loose. And this overreaction by the police is reported quite often around the country. And it happens. And I think we want to feel more confidence in our coppers than we do. We don't have much confidence in our politicians. But we have even less, I think, in the coppers, and particularly when they disappear, particularly from an area like Lewis, which the police tell me, and this came direct, so it's not rumour or anything, that this is considered to be a low-crime area. So the low-crime area has less coppers. Personally, I would have thought is that a low-crime area is because you've got more coppers. But there we are. This is the funny thinking that pervades throughout the ranks of our leaders, of the people who are supposed to look after us nowadays. So why we can always get about 10 or 12 people turn up for one thing, I mean, courthouse on Lewis on I think it's Tuesday on court day. If you want a copper, you can go down there and take your pick. The rest of the time, it's not so good. And there is evidence of social crime, if you like, the little stuff, where the kids shout and scream. There's a bunch of girls in a gang going around Lewes and causing havoc. The kids get a little bit drunk and yell after midnight, that sort of thing. It's returning. We suffered it very much in Lewes in the late 1990s. And at the beginning of the noughties. And there's a lovely, lovely lady associated with Lewes Police called Tracy Honey. She's quite a big lady, and a very lovely lady, and she's a great delight to talk to, because she, once again, like Mick Silas, is pretty intelligent and pretty rational about things that go on. Apparently she did such a good job here that she was posted on. But she actually resolved, certainly in the area top of Lewes, in other words, up by the town hall, she actually managed to sort it out, and we didn't have any problems until last Saturday night, when a group decided to sit on the, I suppose it's sort of the concrete surround of the system that draws in the air into the Pelham Hotel. And it makes a nice little ledge, and they sit there and drink. I mean, people do in the middle of the day. They sit there and have their lunch and so on, no problem there at all. But at 12:30, 1 o'clock, when they've been kicked out of the pubs and they stuff a few beers in their pocket and come down, it can be pretty noisy and pretty upsetting and disturbing. So it's one of those things that we really are seeing a return of social disorder. And perhaps it's almost inevitable with the attitude that the authorities take towards policing. Anyway, that's another yammer, rant. But that's why we're here. If we can highlight some of these things, then perhaps we will get enough annoyance going, irritation in the community, to get some of them put right. Because believe it or not, people power can be very effective. And at the moment, people power is needed. I'm not talking about those people who parade with posters and so on outside the House of Commons and just unload invective on the individual MPs. I'm talking about those people who sensibly protest. We're a democracy, and that's what it's all about. And if we don't like something, we can say so without being locked up. It's very, very important, because I have worked across the Balkans, the Baltics, Russia, Middle East, Ukraine, and there's still very much a lot of, if you start to protest, the coppers will grab you by the scruff of the neck and thrust you into a car, and away you go. Not as bad as it was, but it still exists, believe me. So we are lucky in this country that we're able to protest, and protest we should. And one of the protests I suggest that we think about, and people are thinking about, is the way we are policed needs reform. Just the same as everybody needs reform in the House of Commons, in the local councils, and once again articulated by who many people think is a buffoon, but dear old Boris. And he really got it right with his speech the other night. Except who should spend the money. But anyway, that's another story. Oh, gosh. There's something here which I played the other day. It's very, very strange and very interesting. But let's have another go at it. It's called The Sad Night by a composer called D. Yan Key. So let's take a little listen, shall we? Well, it's not that bad, is it? I suppose it is a bit sad, and I suppose the night is sad. Just as an aside, a knight for whom I have a great regard and esteem is the knight that stands down in Lewes Priory. We call him Sir Genry. And for those of you who haven't been down to Priory Park, you should, because the ruins are not that spectacular. It was a magnificent monastery from 1078, 1079 until about 1540 or so, when Henry VIII had it pulled down. And it's only the inner shells that are left, but it's hauntingly beautiful. And it really gives you the feeling of what that monastery was like, and the monks who would wander around that particular part of Lewes. And it was an important part of Lewes, believe me. But the knight that stands there is about 8 feet tall, and he's a metal sculpture, and it's not the knight himself, but a helmet as worn by a knight in 1264 and the Battle of Lewes. And the reason that he's in the Priory grounds, and quite magnificent he is, you really, if you haven't been down to see him, you should. It's just a fantastic statue, a sculpture, really. But it stands on the spot where the Mise or Mise of Lewes was signed, which signalled, in effect, the first Parliament, where the barons would take part, along with the king. In other words, the birth of democracy, as it truly was. Magna Carta so kicked it off, but nobody paid any attention to it once it was signed. But the Mise of Lewes and the Battle of Lewes, which was fought, obviously, in Lewes, or just on the outskirts of Lewes, towards Opham, it really started democracy for us. And we can be reminded of that every day, and it's just as well, because I think that it's very important for us to remember and realise that we do live in a democracy. The only people that have forgotten are the authorities, the people who govern us. They've got so far up their left navel that they really have got out of control and have forgotten why they're there. And yesterday it was interesting that it was reported that there's a bunch of complete Brexiteers. Doesn't matter where you stand, but these people want to go to leave the EU at any cost whatsoever. And the editorials pointed out that they actually are going right against their party's manifesto, right against what the party actually offered or promised in the election, not because they are, I suppose they would argue, well, we're doing it exactly as we said we would, but I think that the manifesto said that it would be done responsibly and effectively, and just dumping ourselves out of the EU. Even I think that that's the wrong thing to do, and you can guess where I stand on the issue. But they are out of control, and everybody's doing exactly what they feel like doing up there in Westminster. And it's not good enough. It is not good enough indeed. And I think that the next election, when it comes, and it may come sooner than we think, the next election is going to tell the tale. And the polls apparently at the moment show that we may well have Jeremy Corbyn in charge, so brace yourselves. The fact is, they bring it on themselves. The sad thing is that they may bring it on the country. And this whole mess may be something for which we are regretful for the rest of time. And I hope that that's not the case. If they don't get their act together up in Westminster, and get it together soon, and if some of these petulant MPs who stamp their little feet when they don't get their own way don't come to heel, don't start to realise just how irresponsible they're being, then we are in trouble. Right, okay, have I got time to play? Yeah, well, hang on, if the weather is going to be bad, let's try just very quickly for something called The Coming Storm with Ethan Mikesell. the coming storm. And just a warning that we have got storms coming. On Monday, some of them were called thunder snowstorms. Never come across a thunder snowstorm before, but it's pretty severe. And we can expect a lot of snow right across the country. Whether it'll hit us or not is a moot point, but beware, because it's going to be very cold and very slippery. Keith Hayes with Rousel Radio, coming out of Lewes in East Sussex and covering the tiny towns of Sussex from Battle to Brighton. If you don't live down here, take a look on the map and you'll find that it's a delightful part of the world. Very rural, plenty of coast, lovely little towns. Indeed, a playground, an ideal playground. And let's hope our lords and masters aren't going to cock it up. Didn't even mention Lewes District Council this morning. Well, let's have a laugh. Let's say Lewes District Council. I have to whisper it because Lewes District Council, because otherwise I just break into huge laughter. But it's no laughing matter. And I didn't get time this morning to talk about this lawsuit. And I will tomorrow, because a friend of mine tried hard to bring a very, very worthy project, not necessarily to Lewes, but to some local district in the UK. And the man who is funding it, who is putting in 20 million into this very worthy project, said to him, you've got to find a council throughout England that isn't corrupt in one way or another. And he said, because I never have. And my friend Mike thought, how cynical is that? Until the project is still pending and he can't find a region that doesn't want somehow to get a cut, or the officials don't want somehow to get some sort of a cut and to get their fingers in what could be a very lucrative pie. Oh, isn't that sad? Keith Hayes, till tomorrow, toodle pip, and here is our lovely people at Bensound with the music we always play out, Endless Motion.